So I made a promise to myself that this will be the last video I make regarding the design for the Rotopax slash high lift jack carrier until we actually have something tangible, have some of this stuff made, and we can actually show kind of how it all goes together and how it's actually going to go on the rig. So last one I'm going to do for this design. I've made some updates to it. Most of it had to do with the actual Rotopax mount itself, which I received and was able to measure, index, etc., locate the holes, size of the holes, the spacing of the holes for that mount. The mounting plate for the Rotopax DLX, which is what I'm using plus an extension, is I don't know, it's a little under 2 inches spacing, center to center for the holes, and the holes themselves are square, which is kind of interesting, 1/4 inch squares. So I've placed those holes. I've actually shown, I can actually zoom in on this a little bit. I've actually put the bolts in the washers. These are carriage bolts, 3/4 inch carriage bolts. Actually, they're 6mm carriage bolts that are 20 millimeters long. What's not shown here is the security nuts that are going to go. These are nylocks. The security nuts are going to go over the top of those just to secure them. The nylocks are really it's doing the work of actually holding it on, and actually, because it's better use locking nut for that. But the security nuts will deter theft. So just make it a little bit harder for somebody to get at those Rotopax, because all of this is exposed on the rig. It's easy to put a wrench on that if I didn't do something about it. You can see over here that I've put holes in the gussets. I have 3 strengthening gussets for the part of the mount, or part of the carrier, that actually carries the Rotopax jugs and the high lift jack. Those holes are to reduce weight a tiny little bit, but also to allow for better cable management. And I'll talk about why that might be helpful in a minute. As part of receiving the DLX kit from Rotopax, I thought, why not? I've got some time on my hands. I'll just model it. So I made a model of the actual. It's extremely accurate. I'm sure that's not surprising, of that, and you can kind of see the backside of it here. So and I also adjusted the somewhat terrible 3D warehouse Rotopax jug models, because when I scaled them to accurate size, everything got a little deformed. So they're still somewhat deformed, and they're not exactly right in terms of where all the handles are, etc. But it's close enough. And so now this actually, the holes that the mount goes through are actually round now. It's interesting. So anyway, let's look at the next scene. So this just adds a spare tire. You can see back here is a CB antenna, or what's representing a CB antenna. Now, I personally am not planning on using a CB antenna right away with my rig. I'm probably going to be using a handheld radio, and really only specifically as almost like a walkie-talkie when I go wheeling or overlanding with my brother. This is not something that but at some point, who knows? I might want to put a CB antenna. I might want to have a dedicated CB radio, or whatever type of radio makes the most sense in the rig, and have a real antenna associated with it. It's an ideal place to mount it, and I'll show that in a minute. So now we're going to flip around to the other side. So you can see here's the Rotopax DLX with the extension that I'm going to require because I'm stacking the jugs, and you can see how it's mounted to that plate, and also you can also see that this gusset, reinforcing gusset, also has a hole in it. That's really not for cable management, just to reduce weight a little bit. There's really no reason for it to be solid all the way, so we're just going to cut it out and make it a little lighter. This is meant to represent a antenna mount. Now, like I said, I'm not planning an antenna on my rig right away, so all I'm really doing is locating some holes, and at some point in the future I'll probably fab up this little mount, and it's just an L bracket. And that will with 1/4-inch material, just to make it kind of beefy, and the antenna will mount to that. There's nothing magical about it. And then the cabling for this is going to come through this opening and then through the holes in the gusset plates on the inside, that angle, and then at some point be fed into the door. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do that, but I'll probably somehow utilize the same opening in the door that's used for the backup camera. I think I can make that work. But it's just getting that antenna to work it's going to be a big deal. But putting a couple extra holes in this plate when it's being fabricated is easy. It's a lot easier to do it at that point than to try and do it later, where you got to drill it and then paint it, and it's just a lot. It'll be a lot better to do it this way. All right, so let's add a few things. So here's the high lift jack, and I think, like I said in my previous video, we're using 1/2-inch carriage bolts, bolting from the inside of the plate out to the jack, and there's 2 mounting points. One that's actually in the ladder of the high lift, and the other one that's through the lifting hook. There's a little kind of a oblong-ish shaped hole in that, and so one of these is going to get a knob like I'm showing here. The other one is going to, and probably the upper one, is going to get a keyed locking knob that high lift sells. So we only need one of those, so that's going to be there. The lock for the Rotopax is probably going to be a Gorilla clamp. Probably. Mainly because I don't think that the locking handle that Rotopax sells works with the extension, at least based on what I'm seeing. The information that they have online is really, really vague. It's just extremely vague. They don't come out and say, oh, by the way, if you're going to use the extension, don't use the locking mount because it won't work. They don't come out and say that. They say, well, it's just, the language is just very vague. Until they prove otherwise and answer my question that I sent to them, I'm going to assume that it's not going to work, and I'm going to need an alternative. And it looks like the Gorilla clamp is probably the best way, and it's not very expensive, like $20. And it works with any padlock, which is great. Okay, let's look at the next scene. So now we're adding the Rotopax, and you can see, now this hole, which previously was kind of almost football shaped, is now actually round. So, it actually looks more realistic. We'll show that when we go into the 2D view. Let's see, next scene. All right. This just kind of shows, the full high lift jack. We're gonna use the 42-inch. We're going to use one of these rubber. I don't know. It's like it's not really a clamp, but it's a thing that kind of holds the handle of the high lift to the lifting ladder. and just so that the handle doesn't clatter around or come back and hit the rig or whatever. It just kind of holds everything together. It's a necessity if you're going to be, if you're, yeah, you're moving your high lift around on any kind of terrain that's going to cause it to vibrate. So yeah, and then I can even open the door. Well, this is not the best angle for that. We'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, so all that's animated. Let's look at the next scene. So now we're looking at 2D view. Now this kind of gives you a better idea of, and a more detailed view of where that antenna mount's going to be located. And really, we're only talking about 2 holes for this. It's really easy. Here's the DLX with the extension through the now circular opening in the Rotopax, and this box over here is actually the hinge for the door. And again, I'm not really sure if I have this in the correct orientation. It may not be perfectly vertical. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I think, yeah, it's probably not perfectly vertical. But for the purposes of this, it's not that big a deal. I'm less concerned about the door, and I'm more concerned about just, the mount itself that's going on it. Okay, next scene. Now we're going to flip around to the other side. And here you can see, okay, here are the 4 mounting points for the Rotopax DLX. And yeah, that's about all there is to show there. Let's go to the last scene, which is really just kind of a close-up. And I talked about this a little bit in my last video. So one of the things that we did when we took the spare tire off to index the all the spare tire mounts and then understand where those are located, where the spindle for the windshield wiper is located, but we also want to know the spacing of the windshield wiper off the door, and it's about 3/4 of an inch. Yeah, I took a 3/4 inch piece of wood and I slid it in there, and it fit pretty tight. It's pretty good. So my intention is to have a working windshield wiper while this thing is on there. I don't want to impede that in any way. So whatever we are doing, we want to make sure that there's enough space for the windshield wiper to operate. So everything has to be inside of 3/4 of an inch off the door. So in order to do that and have a reasonable thickness of metal and et cetera, that's why we're using carriage bolts, because of the low profile head. And because we have that kind of extending and protruding out the back of the plate, we need spacers on the 4 mounting points. So that's what that little thing is right there. That's a spacer. That's the head of the carriage bolt. There's the other spacer down below in the carriage bolt. So we have 4 carriage bolts that basically attach the 2 parts of the mount, or parts of the carrier. And then we have 4 bolts that are going to attach everything, including the existing tire mount, spare tire mount, to the door. Now it's interesting. Toyota has the way they set this up is pretty interesting, because there's actually the way the tire mount is attached to the door. There's 2 headless bolts that receive nuts, and then there's 2 10mm bolts at the bottom. And it's really kind of brilliant, because they wanted to make sure that there was a way to kind of hang this thing, or just place it on the door, to make it easier to take it on and off. They very easily could have just used 4 bolts and just made life a little bit more difficult for whoever is doing this, because Lord knows how many times you're going to take the tire carrier on and off your vehicle. But they thought about it, and they said, well, we're just going to make it easier. I mean, it's fascinating, the way that this vehicle's engineered, and how much thought has gone into it. I never ceases to amaze me. It's like an onion, and I keep peeling back the layers. Like, wow, that's pretty incredible. Yeah, for a car that was literally rushed to market in almost record time, from concept to actual production, it's pretty amazing what they did. Of course, they probably had to borrow a lot of ideas from other vehicles too, but it is pretty incredible. Okay. Anyway, that's it. Last video for this Rotopax / high lift jack carrier design, until we actually get something real. Thanks for watching. See ya. Bye.